Let's talk about Lonzo, Will. You pointed out that there is maybe still this window for the designated career-ending injury clause.
Yeah.
And that it's not Bulls team doctors, but how did you phrase it? Like a panel of independent doctors?
Independent doctors. So the Bulls would basically file a motion.
4 out of 5 doctors believe Lonzo's career is over.
Basically, yeah. I mean, the Bulls would file for a panel of doctors. And I think what makes this a challenge is that the Players Association and Lonzo have to also be on board with it. The Bulls could say, like, you're not going to play anymore.
Yeah.
But Lonzo is going to say, yeah, I am. I'm trying to come back. Like, I'm making progress. I'm on the court. And so they're not going to probably be able to get that money off. I think with his attempted comeback, it makes it difficult. It's still possible that, they try to work around it and the Bulls are able to kind of force the issue. But my expectation is that if they're going to remove Lonzo from the books, it's going to have to come via waive-and-stretch, which has been talked about a little bit on the Twitter machine of late. Basically, thank you, Joe. Basically, a waive-and-stretch allows you to pay out the remaining number of dollars over twice the remaining number of years on the contract plus one.
Right.
So Lonzo's got $21 million over next year. If they waive and stretch him, it would be about a $7.1 million dead cap hit on this year, the following year, and the year after that. So 3 more seasons with about $7 million on the books. And yes, that does provide some relief this year, as you can see. In this example, it's a little bit different than the article because I'm including for basically bringing back Torrey Craig, Javonte Green, and Bitim on the minimums just to fill out the roster because, looking at half of a roster sheet's a little bit weird.
Right.
But if you do that and you have DeMar at $40 million, you have Patrick Williams on the qualifying offer, you are still $4 million over the luxury tax. So, you could maybe find a way to dump Javon Carter, or maybe you get DeMar DeRozan to take a $10 million pay cut. Now you're in the green a little bit here in terms of not being at the tax line, but you still have a full roster and there's no change made. So even with some of that, like, I think a Zach LaVine trade is going to be the one area where the Bulls can shake things up. But again, what if the Pistons throw $20 million at Patrick Williams?
Yeah.
Like, what do you do in that situation? I mean, can you let him walk for nothing? Like, basically, like, everybody's like, well, just sign and trade. If a team like the Pistons, who has cap space, offers Patrick Williams $20 million, they don't have to work out a sign and trade. They can just take him into their cap space.
Right.
So
if Pat takes that offer to the Bulls and the Bulls say we don't want to match it, then he can just go.
They don't have to create room in order to match it by sending out money. So I think the Bulls are in a bit of a precarious situation with that. And I think, again, it's going to be difficult to figure out a solution on Zach LaVine's contract before you have to re-sign Patrick Williams, before the window to extend DeMar DeRozan is up. And do you want to let him get to unrestricted free agency? Do you want to pay DeMar DeRozan $40 million, even $30 or $35 million a year, just to be able to kind of run back the rest with maybe you do get like a couple of role players and a little bit of cap relief for Zach LaVine. And that allows you to bring back DeMar at $40 million or $35. And it allows you to bring back Patrick Williams at $14 or $15 million a year instead of letting him walk for nothing. You're just running it back. And we saw what happens when you run it back.
A couple times.
They're not good enough to even make the playoffs. And maybe they do kind of hit their stride and, they become the best possible version of themselves. They're a first round out. Yeah. That's just how it is. And so, again, I think it kind of comes back to this idea that in order to make change, you need to make major change. And tinkering or moving deck chairs around is just going to result in more of the same. And I think they have this window here where DeMar is expiring, where you can kind of pivot into more of a youth movement, whether that includes Kobe and Aya or not. I haven't really made up my mind how I feel about that, but I think they should be looking at offers just because that's, again, the reality of the situation. It's just a tough spot to be in, and I think ultimately this DeRozan situation could come to a head before they have to make a decision on LaVine or before they can find a suitor for LaVine. And I think that puts them in a position of weakness where they're not necessarily able to even if they do want to bring DeMar back, they might not be able to.
It doesn't feel like you're saying they can operate from anything but a position of weakness in this situation. They can't control Zach. They can't control DeMar. You just laid out why they might not even be able to control Patrick Williams.
Yep.
So
1,000%. They're reacting
from that weakness perspective all the time, correct?
They're reacting to anything. And that's why again, I've been pushing for a rebuild. I think that's the one situation where you can take some control
yes.
of
jump out of it,
of your future and of what your team looks like and how you're like how you project to be in the future. Like, I don't think this team is going to be very good next year if they run it back again. They weren't very good this year.
Yeah.
They also won 27 out of 44 clutch games. Like, replicating that as DeMar gets to his age 35, 36 season, it's just not feasible.
Wildly improbable.
And so you look to trade Caruso before you have to give him $20 million a year. You look to move Kobe and Ayo if you can get a haul of draft picks. You look to do a sign and trade with DeRozan because that might be the only possible option here for you to get something back rather than just letting him walk for nothing. Or seeing what happens with Vooch, you end up overpaying him for the rights to keep him and remain competitive, only for him to decline as a player because he's in his mid to late 30s by the middle and end of that deal. So I think that's a great point, Dave, and it's a great way to think about it is like, what can we do to take ownership and take accountability and take control of our situation? And I don't see this this continuity, this maintaining things in the middle as being as that being a possibility.
I mean, you did present one avenue in your column as far as, okay, what can the Bulls control this offseason as far as these financial decisions they have in front of them, and that lots of them are out of their control, at least the starting points, and waiting for other dominoes across the league to fall. The Lonzo thing. So even if it's unlikely that we get to that career-ending injury, consultation from independent non-team doctors to clear it that way, you brought up that you can also waive and stretch. And in doing so, the rule is paying it out over twice the amount of years of the remaining deal, which for Lonzo is 1, so 2 years, and then adding 1 to that. So basically taking the remaining 1 year and 20 whatever million on Lonzo and dividing it into thirds over 3 years, which would mean paying Lonzo $7.1 million this coming season instead of 21. And if you do that, if you waive and stretch Lonzo, you'll get just under luxury tax by about 2.8 million, as you pointed out. But then still, you're short 3 roster spots, and you are only a shade less than 3 million away from that luxury tax line.
And more importantly, the rest of the team is the same.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
again, you might turn Zach into like Kevin Huerter and Harrison Barnes, and now you've filled out your roster and you've saved some money. Like, great. What's the upside there?
We all silly like the mayor.